Welcome to Health Systems CIO's interview with Mari Savickis, VP of Public Policy with CHIME. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Mari, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Anthony, for having me.
All right, excellent. You want to start off? Most of the folks know CHIME well. Most of our readers are probably members, but for maybe those who aren't as familiar, what's the quick overview on CHIME and a little bit about your role there?
Sure. I am Chime's Vice President of Public Policy, and I head up our Government Affairs Department in Washington, D.C. We are a membership organization comprised of CIOs, CISOs, Chief Digital Officers, Chief Medical and Nursing Officers, pretty much the entire C-suite in charge of technology deployment and purchase in hospitals and health systems and other provider locations across the country.
All right, excellent. So we're going to talk about policy today. Obviously, that's what you pay attention to. Would you say right now, historically speaking, is an extremely active period? Is there a tremendous amount going on, or is this par for the course, or are we slow compared to historical times?
I think there's like a two-part answer to that question. August is traditionally a slower work period for Congress. I think most people know that, who are at least in the Beltway. That's a time when, like, a work period, they're going home to their district. It's a little bit quieter. People take vacation. So Congress overall a lot slower. It's completely different on the administration side. The administration side is pumping out regulations all summer long. In our case, we pay attention to rules coming out of CMS and HHS, and the payment rules start coming out in April, and they come all the way through the summer, right up into the fall. And then when in the fall, they start getting finalized. So things like the IPPS final rule, which is the hospital payment rule, right? The physician fee schedule, and then layered in between. So those are cyclical rules that come out every single year, and you always have to call through them and just take a look and see what kind of nuggets might be in there. What's been even more seismic of those, for at least for our members, has been some of the stuff that's coming out of ONC. And I think a lot of it's made national headlines. But we had HTI 1 last year, right? That's been finalized. And now they're on to HTI 2. That's still proposed. It's a very complex rule. And my team is looking at it, Chelsea in particular. It's very, very thick.
Wow.
even the attorneys are a really thick rule. So we're still making our way through it. There's going to be some implications more for payers this time, but it's still something we need to pay attention to. And then, of course, ONC just got a promotion. So they are now elevated within HHS. And again, that might seem really wonky and, again, inside baseball, but I think that there's a few nuggets to pull out here. And they center a lot around AI, actually. So if you go and read the press release, you're going to see that part of the reason that they were promoted or elevated within the profile of HHS on the org chart is because of the increasing role that AI is playing in healthcare. And so that's something that we're watching very carefully. And that in turn translates into a lot of conversations. We could go off in a number of different directions, but let me just pause here. Those are just two things. I mean, I've got a lot of other things that we're paying attention to, but just to bring it back to your question, Congress slower and administration is a little bit busier.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the key issues in this discussion, and probably something you try and do for your members, is you're taking a tremendous amount of information. You're trying to absorb all this information and then distill the important points, the impactful points, the because a lot of things that people talk about around legislation maybe never come to fruition, right? So it's like if there's a piece of legislation that's probably not going to go anywhere, as a CIO, like I have so much to worry about. I really want to know stuff that's really going to happen, and I want to know how it's going to affect me. So that's a big part of your job, right? Is taking the ocean and boiling it down, figuring out what's going to happen, what's impactful, and then what out of that is important to the members. So tell me a little bit about that dynamic, how you manage that, and then we can get into what you think currently some of those points are that are impactful and meaningful to the members. And hey, you need to start preparing for this type of thing.
Yeah, I love that question, Anthony, because I mean, this is what we do for our members every single day, and we absolutely love our jobs here doing what we do. which, I mean, I know some people might think that they'd rather pull the eyelashes off their face than read a government regulation. I completely understand that. We might be unique in that we enjoy reading legislation, we enjoy reading rules, but your question is, essentially, how do you make sense of like so much information? It's an incredible amount of information coming at us every single day, and the CIOs and the other Cs are extremely busy. How do we distill that down into just little bite-sized pieces? We do this a number of different ways. Number one, we cut through the noise for the members, okay? We do this by reading the rules that we identify based upon their own input, and I'll get back to that in a moment, is being important. We know which ones are important because we know it matters to the members. We know the HTI 1 and 2 will matter. We know that when, for example, HHS reopens HIPAA security, which is happening, we know that's going to be a seismic impact to the membership. And they may not be even tracking, oh my gosh, wait, what are you talking about? They're going to reopen HIPAA? Yes, they are. HIPAA security coming soon. So we have our finger on the pulse because we talk to the members every single day. We know what is a pain point, what's working well, what's, what's really kind of a fly in the windshield for them, and with things they have to deal with, like what I call like right away, like, oh, we got to stop, drop, and roll. We got a cyber incident. So we have a pretty good idea of what, when the government is touching things, like what we need to pay attention to. And I like to say we're small but mighty. We're going to prioritize, right? We're going to help the members prioritize. And the easiest way to get your arms around this, even if you're not a member of CHIME, is to join a professional organization like CHIME, or, maybe it's a medical society, maybe it's AMIA, informatics, whatever it is that you need to plug into that. That's what they will do for you, is they will cut through the noise. And for example, CHIME has a Monday e-newsletter. It is very, very short, pithy, and to the point, pieces. So say you're only interested in cyber. We have a lot of cyber in our newsletter every Monday. Every Monday, e-newsletter to your inbox. If you're not getting it, it's free. Contact me, and I'm sure Anthony, I can give you the email now, but we can put it in like later in your notes. It's policy@chimecentral.org. Anyone can sign up for our newsletter. It gives you that information so that before you meet with your boss, before you're going into the board meeting, just before you're having any meetings that week, maybe you hadn't heard of like a new acronym. Maybe you didn't know that ONC got reorganized. We will give you that information in bite-sized pieces. And so we help do that. And any good membership organization should be doing that for their members.
Yeah, and the time element's a big thing here, right? Because now when something actually gets enacted, they try and put in lots of time or ample amounts of time for the people that are affected to deal with it, right? So it's going to be a comment period. You're going to have this, you're going to have that. Then we're going to do it in phases. So they try and build in time. But I think one of the things that you offer and that this kind of knowledge offers is, as you said, reading the tea leaves. So, there's sometimes I need to make decisions in what I'm doing around technology, and having these sort of possible markers out there is going to help. So you see what I'm saying? You can get ahead of things. I can skate to
Yeah.
the puck, even if the puck's not dropped yet. And I don't watch a lot of hockey, and I don't know if they dropped the puck, but this skate to the puck type thing. So, time. Talk about the element of time in these things and regulations, in the sense of being able to comply. So they try and put in time, enough time, but having more time is always better, right? So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, before I answer that question, let me step back for a moment. CHIME has a policy steering committee of about 30 members. And many times when we ask a member to join the policy steering committee, many times they have a really strong appetite for policy. But then there are many members on our policy steering committee who have said like, oh, Mari, I'm not really sure about this. I'm not really a policy expert. Here's the thing is, we don't need you for your policy expertise. That's what my team and I do, right? We will help you, but we do need you to tell us, answer your question, like as you're trying to figure out your capital budget, right? You're trying to figure out where you're skating to. You're trying to like peek around the corner. We're going to help you peek around the corner. But in doing so, we're going to also ask your feedback. For example, like I think about these cyber mandates. They're not yet made. Well, there's some mandates, things that HHS has been considering. Cyber best practices, currently voluntary. The White House wants them to be mandatory. Many members in Congress are very interested in that. However, insert the new Supreme Court decision, which some people may or may not be following. This might seem like, oh, this is really, again, under the hood, but there was a major Supreme Court decision this summer. You could Google the Chevron deference that just basically gives a lot less latitude to the administration to agencies if it's not clearly articulated in law. It doesn't mean they're, agency's going to go back and rip up every rule and guidance document, but it does mean that moving forward, that if it's not concretely described within the statute, it's not going to be as easy for the administration to move forward. And so bringing it back to the cyber mandates and peeking around a corner, for years we've been priming the pump saying, listen, members, listen, like these are coming, okay, 2 years, they're going to be here someday. And now that someday got here, and then the Supreme Court came in and made a decision that upends a lot of different things in Washington. It's not just this cyber situation. So right now, I think there was some movement doing one thing, and now I think that they have had to pivot. And we were expecting a rule from CMS, and that didn't materialize, or at least it has not. And so I think, if I had to speculate, that the administration is going to pivot and put more of the eggs inside of the HIPAA basket. So does this mean that the mandates aren't going to come? I don't know that that's the case. I would still say you should be working actively towards improving your cyber posture and looking at the 405D. And again, you have my email if these are all new terms to you. 405D has become much more of the lexicon in cybersecurity and healthcare, but it's basically the voluntary cyber best practices. Now, I think what remains to be seen is like how the government is going to put these into place as a mandate, right? And make sure that they are, not going to get clawed back maybe by the next administration should it change, or as a result of the Supreme Court decision. So the first thing is to go through comment and rulemaking. That's number one. So that's where members can get engaged. If you're like, oh, I don't know government regulation, here's the thing is like, we will break it down for you. We're going to have a deck, right? We're going to walk you through the pieces of the rule that we think are most important. And we're going to start whetting your appetite, because there's usually a proposed rule, right? First, not always, but often there's a proposed rule. And we're going to break it down in slides and just be like, okay, bite-sized pieces. Let's get through this piece. What do you think, Anthony, of this? Should everybody have like two-factor authentication? They're like, let's just go through this. We need exceptions for things, so we start asking the members just from their practical knowledge as a CIO or CISO, what do you think about this? And then we formulate a response. So the average member doesn't need to write a response to the government. We will do that for them, taking their input. And so it's a lot of like, you're asking me like, how do they peek around corners? They can get involved with your association, take it in bite-sized pieces. You don't necessarily need to read the whole rule. And then you really start to like, it's not something you asked about timing. It's not something that happens overnight. A lot of times, when we go to CMS or ONC or HHS, we say, we can do a lot of what you're asking us to do, but we can't do it all at once. It's eating a whole apple, you're going to choke. It never ends up well for anyone. So we need to space it out. And typically, technology deployments, our members tell us 18 months to, maybe 24 months. There needs to be development time for the vendor, right? Workflow training and reengineering within the provider, and then full deployment. So there are things that can happen, but it does take some shifting in mindset, and along the way, making sure that things don't, break things along the way. So I don't know. Does that help answer your question?
It does. It does. I want to ask you if you want to talk a little more about that Chevron decision. Is that change your thinking? Does that change members' thinking? Should that change anybody's thinking? Is it changing ONC's thinking or HHS? So all these entities that promulgate regulations, does it completely change not only existing regulations and the requirement to adhere to them? Does it invalidate them to a certain extent? And does it change how regulations are going to be created in the future?
I mean, I think it does. I think that the decision wasn't specific to health, but it has implications for every sector. And I do actually think at the highest levels of the government that they are considering, things that they had in the pipeline or were teeing up. They are trying to figure out how to navigate this. And I don't think it's a clear pathway right now because, again, there's the deference to the agencies where there was some ambiguity is that has been removed. And so just like I said, like with cyber mandates, if you try to shoehorn these into places that that are not natural fits necessarily, like say like the Medicare conditions of participation. So that wouldn't be probably, well, I mean, it may or may, it was going to be a rule, so at least there would be that, but I'm not sure that that's the most natural place. I mean, I could probably argue for and against the HIPAA security rule, right? Because HIPAA has been in the books for a long time, and there are pieces in there regarding standards and security. So I think it remains to be seen, but I do think a lot will be borne out in the courts. But the administration, whether again it's this one, and if it changes, it will be the next one, is going to have to consider, you know, how far they want to go. And I think it would change if it was a different, if it was a Republican administration. I think things would be different. They'll, you know, like red tape cutting and things like that. But either way, the answer to your question in the shortest possible is yes, they are considering this.
All right, very good. Do you want to give a few highlights of pieces of legislation that people should be looking at? You mentioned certainly a number of them already, but is there anything else you want the folks out there, as you mentioned, your members and the CISOs and the CIOs, anything that might not be on their radar that you're watching that you want to give them a heads up on?
So there's like a few things. I mean, so let me bring it back to one of your first question about, you know, what's going on in Washington. So right now, with all the interest and oxygen leaving the room around the election, that slows things down in Washington. And so typically at the end of a administration, they try to push things out really quickly. And so I think some of that actually got stalled because of Chevron, but I still think you're going to see things get pushed out so that they can, you know, maintain their legacy and cement the policies that they want to have cemented in place. So there's going to continue to be some of that, but I do think some of that was slowed down by Chevron. So then the next piece would be, I don't remember how to answer your question here the best way. There's not a lot that Congress is, you know, on a work period right now. They're not in session. They're going to have to come back and they're going to have to wrap up funding for 2025. So people may recall, or you may not recall, the government actually wasn't funded until I think March of this year for this current fiscal year. The fiscal year starts always October 1st, and it wasn't even finished until well into the current fiscal year. So we're very dysfunctional that way. So they need to finish up that, and that is not going to be an easy task. There's going to be a lame duck right between the election and, you know, the start of the next Congress, the next administration, whoever it is. And so they're going to have to be this end of the year package where they put in some of these bigger issues that we haven't been able to wrestle down, like things that we would care about would be telehealth. The telehealth policies are coming to an end, the pandemic ones, that is, the flexibilities that we've all enjoyed. That comes to an end at the end of this current calendar year, so December 31st, unless there's an extension by Congress, and they have been looking at a 2-year extension, and we've supported laws, bills that move that forward, but that would, you know, we're looking at that to be at the end of the year package, like kind of, you can think of this as a kitchen sink kind of concept. Another thing that we're looking at would be, this is separate from this, but who knows, you know, maybe it could get in there, is a Match It Act. So everyone may know the battle cry for CHIME is patient identification, in terms of like, that's like the piece of the puzzle for interoperability. You know, that's one of the missing pieces. But I would say that's a big missing piece. And that, you know, for everybody who wants to go back and what I call like the policy time machine, patient identifier came out of HIPAA. Can you believe that, in 1996? But Congress has prohibited it being funded. So HHS can never establish, you know, a standard. It's not even a number. Everyone thinks, oh, it's a number. It's actually a standard. So we continue to support the removal. It's gonna be hard still. So I think we've not moved off that entirely, but we have Plan B, which is the Match It Act. And I can send you a link to that. I just checked. I think there's 9 co-sponsors, and this is not an identifier, but it does bring more standardization to make patient matching variables, which we really support. If you can't do the identification standard, maybe you can do a matching standard. So that's something that we are behind, and we're looking for continued support around that, and I can give you that information. AI, right? I don't know that AI is gonna, you're gonna see some piece of seismic legislation on AI. And I would like to just point out, we did just release within the last week an AI set of principles, and there's 10 in there. And that was designed to, it's a multifaceted reason for doing it. It's more than just saying like, well, everyone else did AI principles, we did too. You know, we actually get members saying, I'm meeting with my senator or my congressperson. What am I supposed to say? Or what should I be thinking about? You know, most of our members don't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars to adopt large language models, right? They are middle of the road, and they're just trying to maybe just dip the toe water. So from a policy standpoint, as the government continues, or the administration or Congress begin to consider what kind of guardrails they should be putting around this enormous new era that we're entering into, we need some bumpers. We said to think about this. And one thing, for example, we said, don't treat healthcare like everyone else. Like, don't do a one size fits all, because our commodity is the patients, right? We operate in patient lives. That's the commodity, right? It's not like a widget. And so we need them to think about that a little bit differently. So some of the things that we think about are safety. I mean, you wouldn't be shocked by things we have in there, but we have some policy recommendations, you know, making sure that there's not duplicity in oversight. We need oversight, but you don't want duplicative burden. We want to make sure that HHS, as they're moving forward, they have, as part of the President Biden's executive order, which is extremely long. If you want to read the longest executive order, go read President Biden's executive order on AI. There's several pieces in there, and there's hundreds of tasks for the government. And, you know, one of them is HHS Safety Committee, AI Safety Committee. And, you know, we've talked to them about what our thoughts are around this. We want them to do some use cases, fund it. Like, how about trying out some use cases to help the average hospital system deploy AI in a smart manner where it can be tested initially first? Maybe work on high value use cases like, I don't know, cybersecurity, you know, maybe improve their cyber posture or help them fend off the kinds of crazy attacks that they're experiencing. Maybe look for ways to improve their efficiencies, right? I mean, I don't know, whether it's like scheduling the ED docs or anyone. It could even be behind the scenes. Maybe they want to do the stuff with prior authorization, which is dipping your toe into clinical. There's some pieces we need to move the entire healthcare sector forward. And the bleeding edge will always be bleeding edge, and we have the members going forward first that are doing that. But there's so many who are struggling with the current financial climate. They need some extra help. They need some guardrails. We could use some help from the government in so many different ways to do, even if it's not like specific to AI, but like, how about funding cyber for small, rural, underserved providers so they can improve their posture? You can't have AI without broadband, right? You can't have AI with all this extra data without cyber. So all these things like wrap around to it, and we make the case to the federal government, you know, these are the things we think need to happen.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the telemedicine part, because that, to me, you know, from what I've heard from interviews and things like that, they really want that to continue. Those, you know, the telemedicine policies of the pandemic, and the government, you know, CMS paying and reimbursing for different telemedicine programs. And, you know, I've seen people write that it's going to have a huge negative impact, I guess, on care and maybe on their bottom lines if those go away. So any more thoughts there around the possibility of the telemedicine pandemic policies continuing?
Yeah, you know, and Cassie from my team, she handles congressional. She sent me something that, going back to like how much the volume of reading we have to do. On my reading to-do list is a CBO report that talks about some of the costs. I think one of the challenges is you have to find what we call the pay-fors. Like, how do you pay for the things that you want the government to fund? So that's an ongoing issue in Washington, is like almost everything costs money. And so how do you pay for it? So there's a huge appetite to move this forward, but there's some concerns. There's some program integrity, aka fraud concerns, some cost concerns. So those are the things that are, I think, holding it back a little bit. But I mean, everyone I talk to says, oh, we're going to get I think we're going to get an extension. Okay. So I think everyone, again, hey, dear CIO, another C executive, oh my gosh, you're worried about telehealth. Don't rip it out yet or anything. I don't think they're going to do that. But, peeking around the corner, it's going to continue. I think I can't say with 100% certainty, but I believe that is, if I had to put my money somewhere, it will continue. Now, whether we get the 2-year desired solution, I think that is a little bit less. I know that I might be the minority opinion, and people are saying, on the Hill, oh, it's going to be 2 years. Oh, whatever. So, Anthony, let's circle back on December 31st, and let's just see if it got to 2 years. One would hope we totally support that. Even if it's 1 year, I think we're just going to do, I think what's going to happen, and it reminds me of the physician fee schedule from my AMA days, is kick the can down the road. We love to do that in Washington. Just kick it down a little bit more. We'll deal with that problem in a few years. It's too expensive to do a full throttle solution, so we'll just do it for a year or two, and then we'll come back. So that's what we do in Washington. We shove it off for another year. And so I think, you'll be fine. There's been a little bit of a retraction on the use of telehealth, but there's, that retraction is for a variety of reasons, and the appetite is so strong, bipartisan, that I think we're gonna get there. Just hold on, and again, sign up for our debrief because we'll tell you exactly what's going on, blow by blow.
There you go. That's the sales pitch. Perfect. All right, Mari, I think that covers most of it. Is there anything else you want to add? Any other policy nuggets that you want people to be aware of? I know you've given the advice and the pitch for people getting involved and how you don't have to be a policy wonk. You want them there so they can provide you information about what they're dealing with on the front lines. You'll deal with the policy stuff and work on that translation between the two worlds. But again, any parting points on the policy side or pieces of advice for the listeners who they want to make sure they know. I know you talk about the newsletter. I think, as you mentioned, when they go into a meeting, you're a CIO, you go into a meeting with your board, with your CEO. You want to be able to. You don't want to be caught off guard, right? You certainly don't want to be hit with an acronym that you should probably know, and you say, "Let me get back. Let me get back to you on that." So, final thoughts.
You know what? I would just say, follow me on LinkedIn, right? Message me. You don't have to be a CHIME member. My team and I talk to pretty much everyone. I like to call it, like, we wrap around the entire sector. I want to know what the payers are thinking. I want to know what the vendors are thinking. So it doesn't matter who you are. You can reach out to me or to our team, and we will talk to you. So follow us on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. Sign up for our debrief. If you have no idea where, just find me, right? And then I'll get you signed up. No cost. All of our content is open source. I mean, it's beautiful, right? It's like
Beautiful
all free.
thing.
But it also, it shows the value of CHIME. So I think that is also great. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
It's been a blast, Mari, and I'm sure I'll see you at the John Fall Forum or the next policy conference. It's always great to see you and talk to you.
Thank you.